There are three beliefs about life in the U.S. that Americans, including us, tend to grow up with.
I think we didn't even realize the extent to how ingrained these ideas are in the psyche of Americans until after we left the U.S.
Yeah.
It's almost a little like brainwashing.
A little bit. But now that we live abroad in France, we realize that these almost universally held American beliefs aren't really so true. Hi, I'm Raina.
I'm Jason.
And we're Baguette Bound.
When you grow up in the U.S., you're surrounded by American flags. You recite the Pledge of Allegiance every day in school, right? And you're told both directly and indirectly all the time that the U.S. does everything the best. But then when you move somewhere else, for us it was France, you realize that lots of other places in the world actually do a little better.
Yeah, it sounds so ridiculous and egotistical, I know, but when you grow up in a country as big and as isolated from other countries as the U.S. is, you just really genuinely don't know and haven't seen anything different.
Yeah.
Then when you do see those other places and you realize whoa, there's places where people have universal high quality healthcare and affordable education, and it's statistically much safer than the U.S. It really just shocks your American brain.
Yeah.
There's also this weird, pervasive belief that because the U.S. is the greatest country on earth, if they haven't figured it out, probably no one has.
Yeah. This can include some really basic things, even basic water sanitation.
Yep.
We had friends and family that came and visited us here in France recently, and they had to ask if they could drink the water. They'd actually brought with them a whole set of advanced water purification equipment, and they were brushing their teeth with bottled water at first before we could talk to them and assure them the tap water is perfectly safe.
France is another advanced country.
Yeah.
Yeah. And we thought this was actually even more funny because Evian water from Evian, France sells in the U.S. for $5 a bottle. And so when you're in the U.S., you can drink French water, but not when you're in France. I don't know. Struck us as a little funny.
Yeah. Another commonly held American truism is that Americans are somehow just more free than people in other democracies. Even our national anthem, which we sing all the time, it includes the line, the land of the free, the home of the brave. But what does that land of the free actually mean?
Right.
What liberties exactly do people have in the U.S. that they don't have in so many other places around the world? Not long ago, we heard someone describe the difference in how Europeans and Americans view freedom. And it really struck home. It really captured the spirit of, I think, what we've observed here. Mm-hmm. I think that Americans want the freedom the freedom to carry a gun, to do what they want, when they want, to practice their religion openly, to choose how to spend all their money.
Yeah, and the contrast to that was the idea that Europeans are looking more, they see freedoms from. So freedom from the threat of violence, freedom from dying lack of due to healthcare, freedom from having a religion imposed on them, freedom from pollution and toxins in their environment and food. So, I don't know, we were talking about this concept of what American freedom is. Feels like it's become really extreme in the last few years. Yeah. Meaning in the U.S. now, certain groups expect their own personal freedoms to trump everything else, no matter the cost to society or their fellow Americans.
Yeah, and as an American, the intensity of this individualism, I think it can color how you view the policies of the other countries out there.
Definitely.
Because you don't always realize or have the context to realize that these policies, they might mean different forms of freedom and still make for a more stable, fair, open, and enjoyable society.
Yeah. So, lastly, the thing that has changed that we see differently now is quality of life and how we define it. In the U.S., when we lived there, versus now in France and Europe. When I was a kid in the U.S., my definition of what quality of life or growing up and being able to have a good life was, it kind of revolved around how much money I could make when I grew up. That sounds embarrassingly materialistic. And it kind of is. But, I mean, the honest thing is to be able to buy more, bigger, nicer, better things. It's just like a big focus of American culture. You see it on TV and movies and advertisements. So, I mean, that soaks in even when you're a kid. The house you can buy, the car you can drive, the size of the TV you have. If you buy your clothes or your candles from like certain shops, that all kind of paints a picture and defines if you have a good quality of life in U.S. culture.
Yeah, I think, and maybe in other words, being visibly wealthy is just a stand-in for quality of life in the U.S. Yeah. So I think American people will sometimes say that the quality of life is lower in Europe. And why? Because that's what you can see. Europeans tend to make less money, have lower incomes. They live in smaller houses, they have fewer cars, they have tiny refrigerators. There's often no clothes dryers. What kind of place is this?
See this video.
Yeah. But we've come to understand that Europeans tend to have, I think they tend to be wealthier than Americans in two really distinct ways that might be hard to see from the outside, but maybe probably define quality of life better than a simple GDP number or, the number of seats in your SUV might capture. I think Europeans tend to have both more time and more peace of mind.
Yeah. I mean, I am not saying in any way that the French or Europeans in general they don't have worries, or they're like sitting around eating bonbons, or they never want to buy some, Air Jordans or an American-sized fridge.
Yeah.
None of that. But there's one really big difference, I think, that we've seen. And that is Europeans tend to have a value system around personal time and a social system that around basic human needs that support well-being.
Yeah, those two things, they come together for a quality of life that might be really hard to value on a graph or a balance sheet, the way you could, the stuff maybe in your house could be captured.
Yeah.
And what does those two things look like in France? There's just a deep respect for your free time to be able to spend with family and to do things for pleasure or maybe just intellectual interest.
Yeah.
This might mean that businesses are open for fewer hours, that work weeks are a little shorter, and workers generally get 5 weeks of vacation per year. And this all adds up to like more time for meals with family, more, access to high quality food. These are all things that are seen as essential parts of life.
Yeah.
I'm also not up at night worrying about how am I going to pay and buy my insulin? How am I going to pay for my daughter's education going forward?
So, I mean, again, it's not that life is easy, but there's a sense of ease and safety that I feel here in France that was just missing in the U.S. And I mean, this peace of mind feels worth way more than that overpriced Pottery Barn comforter ever did in the U.S.
Yeah, wealth as the U.S. glamorizes it with more, and flashier stuff. It just doesn't look the same to me now.
Yeah.
And overcoming the idea that no one anywhere does anything better than the U.S., that Americans are somehow freer, or that America is the only place to find a high quality of life. These are all just myths that living abroad has kind of dismantled for us.
Yeah. So, I mean, if you're hesitating to make the jump to live abroad, but it's your dream, don't let these internal beliefs that we as Americans kind of all get brainwashed into our whole lives. Don't let that stop you, because you know what? You're American. You're very optimistic. You can do anything. And sometimes that means moving. Thanks for watching.
A biento.